This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Welcome back to The Forging Table. The mission of Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. At The Forging Table, you'll see a group of regular guys forging spiritual resilience by digging into God's Word, and we're welcoming all of you to come along on that journey with us. That's Dagan, that's Browning, that's Matt Chandler in the flesh. And guys, last podcast, we got through how many words?
We got through 6 words.
Six words, but that's like 1.5 words in the Greek. So I think we're absolutely like smoking it right now. But, you know, last time I felt like we did a disservice because I evangelize 4 things really in life. The gospel of Jesus Christ, eating meat, Christian metal, and jiu-jitsu. Those are the things that I'm basically a walking billboard for. And gosh darn it, we just mentioned jiu-jitsu a couple times and we didn't do a deep dive discussion. And I know, Browning and Dagan, you were both very, very disappointed that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the ins and outs of doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But for you, Dagan, I heard that, you know, early on in life, you got some early exposure to jiu-jitsu, and maybe there's a little confusion that happened with that.
I did. Well, you know, childhood is a confusing time.
It is.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and I was in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. It's where I grew up.
Metropolis.
Yep. And so I had, you know everybody in town. You go to school with everybody in town. And there were 2 brothers that took jiu-jitsu, and but they were also Jewish, and they went to synagogue in Tulsa. So I grew up thinking that they took Jew-jitsu.
J-E-W, not J-I-U.
Yeah,
So
and I was
you're
like,
I can't do it.
I was like, where's the Baptist jitsu? Like, where are we doing jitsu for the Baptist? So, you know, and I thought that for a long time, and I was like, man, they've got, like, they have finally said, you know, shine you to all the oppression, all the centuries of oppression. We are not taking it anymore. And by God, they created their own fighting style. Don't mess with the Jews. They will jitsu you.
There it is.
And then I remember, I was like in the car with my mom. I remember the car it was in. It was this big blue Buick, and we were in a part of town that I hadn't really ever been down before, didn't remember, and we passed by, what is it, a dojo?
It's
what do you
just
call
like
it?
An academy or a gym.
Okay, and it said, whatever the name was, Mr. Gilkey, I think was his name, and it said karate, judo, jiu-jitsu. And it was like,
wait.
Oh.
Jiu-jitsu.
Well,
get it.
You know, there's a thing with language because, again, and I'm sorry to admit this, but I already admitted it on the show, because I was like 2 years old, when I realized that when Scripture was talking about being unequally yoked, that it was yoked and not yolked, like egg yolk.
You're like, I've been telling you guys to do legs.
Yeah, I don't really understand what that was. I didn't understand it was a yolk. I was thinking like eggs, you know, yolk, like, you know, we got some bad yolk and some good yolk. And so, yeah, you know, sometimes we just struggle. But that would be interesting. Because jiu-jitsu can kind of be a rough sport. How do you keep your little hat on? Like while you're doing something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be difficult. That's why they created Krav Maga, because it's a lot easier. Create a fake fighting style and then, like, you know,
just rip their throats out so you don't.
The funniest thing about Krav Maga is like, because there was a guy that was like telling me, he's like, yeah, you know, jiu-jitsu, I don't really know, but like I'm thinking about taking Krav Maga. I'm like, do you know you can't technically train Krav Maga? Because it's like eye gouges and like crotch ripping and different things like that. It's like,
is that dance fighting?
Yeah, but it's not quite dance fighting, but it's close.
Else.
But in the Krav Maga people right now are just like absolutely furious.
Sorry.
It's like, hey, if you want to know if Krav Maga actually works, how about you go to a jiu-jitsu gym and just roll with a decent looking blue belt and see how that goes. But like, yeah, it's like, how many sets of eye gouging did you do at practice today? Like, it's like you can't technically train it. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. I saw a buddy just bought an AI robot
that he can fight.
So maybe they've got one that you
have
can
you seen that?
I have not.
Okay,
hey, listen.
okay. So we'll show it to you. We'll leave him nameless because not everybody likes being named on the show. But yes, I think it's called a roll bot, not a robot, but a roll bot. And the thing is when you armbar it, it'll break. Like, so it'll break and come back and all that. And it's only, like he said, it took over a year for it to come in because it was only being beta tested. The first time I saw an ad for it, I literally thought it was a dude dressed up in like a spandex costume and he was just sitting there like pretending. I thought it was a gag. No, it's like a real thing. And I don't even know how much something like that costs.
No, I just looked it up. Oh my gosh, this is real.
Yeah, it's real. And here's the thing. So it's got like
kind
this
of
thing.
predator looking.
Yeah,
I thought it was from Squid Game.
No,
That's
no,
literally
no.
what
So
it looked like.
It's literally got a thing across its eyes, like what was the
Kit?
unibrow guy from X-Men? What was his name? Cyclops.
Oh yeah, Cyclops.
Cyclops.
Unibrow guy. But no, he. So
James
when you
Marsden.
choke it, it'll verbally tap if you choke it hard enough. The thing though is like I was choking it, and I was choking it for long enough to kill it, and it did not tap. But its eyes will turn red or whatever, like your blood choking it or something like that. But yeah, you can leg lock it. You can do all kinds of different things with it.
Hey, two things. One, I'm pretty sure I don't want to order an AI robot equipped with jujitsu skills
No, it can't
to
fight
be delivered
back.
to my
Well,
house.
you don't know.
It doesn't
You don't
fight
know
back.
that.
Okay.
Yes.
And then second, I mean, you're talking about eye gouging like it's like so casual, like, oh yeah, how are you going to train with that? I don't care how many or how you train to eye gouge somebody. It's obviously you're not training the real way. You could consider yourself an eye gouging master. The first time you go out to pluck out a dude's eye,
Yeah.
you're going to puke. You're going to, like,
not.
right?
You know how I know that's not true is because like if I really don't like somebody and I really need them to just suffer for as long as possible, the thing is you take them down because a general human being, like you just touch their legs and they fall over because they're just top heavy, they just fall over. And then you get in mount, you get a head and arm triangle and you just choke them and then they just softly go to sleep. And then you just start systematically breaking limbs, right? So you Kimura and then Americana, so you break their shoulder both ways.
Yeah.
Then you arm bar them and break the arm. Then you wrist lock them and break the wrist. And then they probably wake up around sometime and then you just kind of choke them back unconscious to put them back to sleep. Then you start working on the legs. So you pop the knees with heel hooks.
This
and then you
actually
do-
sounds like our roll yesterday. I was looking at the roll bot and I was like, wait, is he talking about rolling with
It was
me
close.
yesterday?
It was close. It was. They were really close matches, sort of.
Sure.
Before we started, but then like you straight ankle locks and all those things, and so at that point they are so ready for you to just pluck their eyes out. Like they're ready for it at that point. So you just snatch them out, right? Like a kung fu
I
movie.
saw the Three Stooges. It's just one of these things, right?
It's an easy
It'll
block.
Yeah,
Easy block.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
right.
just saying. So you have to go left or right. So it's not as bad as you might think, Dagan.
Yeah. The robot's like,
Yeah, you know what? I'd never even thought about that thing technically probably does have offensive capabilities, and it's just sitting there the whole time like, this idiot thinks
hey,
I'm
it's
not
one,
real.
They're
it's
gonna
one
upload it.
wireless
Learning yours.
update.
It's one wireless
One
update.
over-the-air update for taking over your entire neighborhood.
You're thinking you can just take the battery out of the back?
48
No, battery backup, baby.
Battery
Solar
backup.
powered.
He's already figured it out. It's coming.
Well, I'm terrified. So let's talk about the Bible because all of a sudden I'm very, very scared about everything. So we are still, guys, if you didn't listen to last week, we started Romans technically. We got through 6 words in Romans 1:1. So we're going to pick back up in Romans 1:1. So Matt, if you'll read Romans 1:1 again, and then we'll move on to the second of 3 parts of the first verse.
Okay. Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God.
So last week we talked about servant and we talked about doulos and bondservant and how you're being purchased and all that. But Paul's introducing himself or reintroducing himself here because again he was Saul of Tarsus. He was a terrorist against Christians at one point, but now he's saying he's called to be an apostle. So I think at this point, some people will look at Bible reading and again, I didn't grow up in church, and so you hear disciple and apostle and you think, oh, these are just synonyms, these are just interchangeable terms. But not really, because even during the time of Jesus' public ministry, there were people that were called apostles and there were people that were called disciples. And some of them were the same person, but it was not the same thing. They didn't have the same criteria, I guess you could say. And so let's just kind of talk a little bit about the criteria of okay, when he says I'm an apostle, what does that mean?
Yeah, so apostle in the Greek just means sent one. The apostles that we see in the New Testament are those who had personally been with Jesus. That's the debate. Are there apostles for today? Are there not? And then there's big A apostles, little a apostles. So that's a whole different, we don't need to talk about that. But Paul is arguing, I have seen Jesus with my own eyes. I have been with him. I am one of the sent ones. I am an apostle of Jesus Christ.
And I think as well, when you look at criteria, So, I mean, if you look at the book of Acts, according to the book of Acts, and a lot of the commentary guys, a lot of us have dug into a bunch of different commentaries. I thought R.C. Sproul's A Year in Romans was fantastic. Yeah. I've dug into Tim Keller's stuff in Romans. And so some of this commentary is going to be, tinged or just straight from some of those things because it's just very helpful. But according to the book of Acts, criteria for being an apostle, either a disciple during Jesus's earthly ministry, 2 is an eyewitness of the resurrection, and 3, directly called by Jesus. And if we look at, Paul was directly called by Jesus. So we see that, that Jesus calls Paul 3 times in the book of Acts. And so the criteria for that is an apostle. But yeah, people do kind of get wrapped around the axle a little bit on capital A or little a apostle or whatever. But for you guys, what else should y'all look at when it came to apostle?
Very similar. I did note that he raised people from the dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of a big deal, right?
Well, we've discussed before, Paul, right out of the gate, the first word of the sentence starts with Paul, and what that really kind of brings to me is the sense of this transformation that Jesus Christ brings. And certainly on the Damascus Road, that's what he imparted to Paul. But moving on to be called an apostle, it's like when you by faith accept the gospel, God, through Jesus Christ, changes your heart, takes you from Saul to Paul, but he also changes your mission.
Yeah.
Right? There is no separation of that. There aren't some people where he changes their heart and does not change their mission. And certainly you wouldn't want to be where he changes your mission without changing your heart.
Yeah.
Those things coincide. And I think when I see this, I think a lot of times like we wouldn't identify ourselves by our mission as Christians, right? It's like saying you're Christian, you're identifying your heart change. But in part of that, it's like, well, the other half of that is like, well, what is the act, purpose, mission that you have been set on? Because obviously Paul's was very overt, right? Like it was like literally so bright it blinded him of what he knew he was expected of. But transformative of the heart, but also the mission in part.
Yeah, he never was short on his knowing what his mission was throughout life. That was one thing that never changed. His circumstances he had no control over, really, in the grand scheme of things. But he could always live out his mission. That was one thing that really impressed me.
Yeah, I think the thing that it again is so profound here, and you talked about it in our 6-word session, the grace of God here, like in Galatians 1:15, the Apostle Paul says, now when the one who set me apart before I was born was pleased to reveal the Son to me. And so now you've got this Saul of Tarsus, and I want to highlight this because I think so many Christians I know never get to their mission because there's this thing in their past, there's this struggle in their present, there are these spaces that for them, they're kind of disqualified from being profoundly and powerfully used by God. But Paul's argument, even in saying, hey, I was called an apostle with his backstory, and then in Galatians, he's going to go, no, that God was still God even when I was wild and out. In fact, now all the more he's taken what was to my shame and weaponized it against the enemy so that I could tell you, listen, I'm the chief of sinners. I don't care what you've done. Look at what I've done, and it pleased the Father to reveal the Son to me. It's this idea that on the day that Paul gets up and he climbs up on that horse and he's heading to Damascus, like God that morning's like, today's the day. Mm-hmm. Today's the day. And that idea that it pleased the Father to reveal the Son to Saul of Tarsus, it is a mind-bending reality of God's grace where we would think, this is a man who should be killed. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's kicked up, and God just keeps doing this with this Saul-Paul dance. Like even if you think Acts 13, the church at Antioch, which becomes ground zero for Paul's missionary journeys. The whole story shifts in Acts 13 out of Jerusalem to Antioch, and Antioch becomes ground zero for Paul's 3 missionary journeys, which is why we have our New Testament. Well, how did the church at Antioch get there? Because at the stoning of Stephen and Saul ravaging the church, they fled Jerusalem, and Antioch is actually planted by Saul ravaging the church. And then Saul ends up being Paul in Acts 13 at Antioch, worshiping with the brethren, fasting and seeking the Lord when the Holy Spirit says, set aside for me Paul and Barnabas for the work that I have for them. So this idea of God redeeming the worst parts of our story, those parts where we think back on them and still feel like nauseous, that we let ourselves go farther than we thought we could, or we did something that was darker than we could have fathomed. Well, right here, and again, we haven't got out of the first sentence yet, that you're seeing the power of grace, that he was called an apostle, and Galatians says it pleased God to do that, pleased him to save Paul and to give him this mission, and that God was still God in the middle of all that nonsense.
Well, I actually want to bring this up because it's very applicable to where we are right now. So typically on the forging table, kind of, we used to have a lot of rules, and we're basically down to one rule, which is basically like, hey, no news cycle stuff because it's going to sound funny in 2 or 3 months whenever this comes out. Like, oh, here we're talking about something. But right now, they're still trying to find the bodies of dead, dead girls and families because of the flooding in Texas. Not far from where you do ministry, and the stories are just absolutely heartbreaking. But then there's also heroism and sacrifice, and the director of Camp Mystic literally died trying to save the rest of the girls that was under his care. And so there have been some ghoulish, evil, horrible people making political statements because they Trump broke their brains, and here they are trying to get a one up on Republicans or conservatives or whatever. But the thing that I want to talk about, which kind of goes to the point or that you were talking about a little bit, is a major dunk of atheists, or agnostics or whatever, is how could your good God allow that to happen? Oh, a few dozen little girls that are at a Christian camp singing Christian songs, and they get washed away and they drown to death. Oh, is there a good God? But you look at what happened with Stephen being stoned, right? What that caused, this fraction that pushed people out. When you see Paul in Acts, whenever he had to split off from Barnabas, right? And for whatever reason, they couldn't reconcile. And so their ministries multiplied. Yeah. So it was a multiplication by division, right? But that is a hard thing. And apologists have been giving their reasons for, they're apologetic for how God can still be good and allow people to die in tsunamis, or for children to be raped and murdered, or for any number of horribly evil things that we see. And then we look at this flood situation and be like, how could there be any good, right? Capital G good coming out of something like this? How can God be glorified? How could his will be done by the suffering of his children? And so, we've all kind of given an answer to that. We've read answers to that. But Matt, even as a pastor, like if you were sitting there, if this happened in your community and you were sitting there with families that are angry at God, angry at you for being a representative of God, and they're saying, but my baby's gone. Yeah. So like, what do you even say to kind of bring them back around to like, hey, this is part of a larger story?
Yeah, well, I certainly probably wouldn't say anything at the moment.
No, of course
I'd probably
not.
just weep with them.
Yep.
And like it really is hard to get the mind around how awful that thing is. And so, man, I'm not coming with any bumper stickers or even Romans 8:28 at that moment. I think the command in Scripture is just to weep with those who weep. And so I do the best I can to enter mourning. But I'd put it in my heart as a young man, I was going to teach the village how to suffer well before it came. We were, I think, median age of the village the first decade I was there was like 24, 25. I didn't do the funeral for a 70-year-old faithful man until I'd been at the church for like 13, 14 years. All my funerals were little boxes. All my funerals were 24-year-old, just got married last year, went fishing, didn't come home. And so I just put in my heart, I want to create a theological grid for us to understand the brokenness of the world and how to cling to Christ when these things happen, because they will happen. I would say all the time, like, our lives are so much more fragile than we think they are. Like, even the four of us, like, our whole life can change with a phone call.
Yep.
Like, any minute. And that's not meant to lead us into anxiety. It's just meant to give us an awareness and a sobriety about the brokenness of the world and the effects of sin on the cosmos, not just people. But Augustine had this illustration. I've always loved it. He talked about having, like, for us, life is like having your face pressed against a stained glass window, that you're just going to see like jagged, broken pieces and a little bit of color, but there's no way for you to comprehend the stained glass window. And that's the promise of all things being made new. That's the promise of Revelation. Like, we could live to be 100 and not find any good from what just happened in Kerrville. I think, like, there's got to be a level of humility in us to go, we're here for about half a second next to God's eternality. Like, we're everlasting. God and God alone is eternal. He has always been. He will always be. That sees things very differently than we see. That experiences things very different than we experience them. So I've oftentimes tried to say, like, imagine going into a 4-hour movie and getting to watch 2 seconds of it and then try to explain to me the plot.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to know who's good, who's bad, what's up, what's down. You got 2 seconds of a 4-hour movie. You'll know nothing. And the Bible's giving you that. It's going, look, you're here. You're like dew on the grass. Like, you're here in the morning and you're gone by afternoon. That we're finite, we're small, we can't see. I don't think if God gave us the answers as clear as we want it, we could comprehend it with this little pea brain that we have. Like, there's a kind of sovereign reign going on right now that's always going to be confusing and mysterious to us. Always. It has to be. God has revealed himself to us in the scriptures. What we know from the scriptures is that he is good. We see him move towards rebellious, sinful people over and over and over and over again. At every point when you and I would say, kill them all, God moves towards and makes a way. Every time. And this is the nature and character of God as he's revealed himself to us. So I have to trust that in the mystery of heartbreak, especially. I have to trust that in the day of trouble. I have to cling to the visible Christ on the cross, dying for my sins, as a picture that God is for me, not against me, that God is working all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But I need that in my bones before the day of trouble, not when it lands, which is why if I'm walking up to somebody who's pissed at God because of something horrific, I'm not even entering into that. I'm just going to weep with them.
When I think, well, obviously, I think weeping with those who weep, and then there's eventually where you do have to get to bedrock on your philosophy. I saw someone do this at one point, but they said, hey, they were trying to explain to somebody, like, you know, whether or not you can believe in God, and so they drew a big circle on a whiteboard, and then they put a dot inside that circle. And they're like, because they asked the person, hey, of all the knowledge that has ever been known, that's personal experiences, that's history, that's everything that's ever happened. If that were a circle, what amount of that circle would you know? And the person's like, yeah, probably very little. So boop, he puts a little dot in there. So the Kerrville situation, the flooding, any tragedy, any negative thing that's ever happened, whether it's to an individual person or to a group of people or whatever, the knowledge of God is the big circle, and your knowledge is boop, that little dot. Yep. Like, because you saw some clips on Instagram, or you watched the news, or you cut a check and sent some stuff out. And can I give a quick shout out to HEB? Like, I'm not a Texas guy, but HEB, I literally watched a video today of, it was like the HEB disaster relief, whatever. And it was 18-wheeler after 18-wheeler before FEMA gets there, before the Red Cross gets there, before anybody. They're loading up stuff from their grocery stores and distribution facilities and getting it to the front line. So, like, I don't know. I have no affiliation with HEB. I just thought that was freaking awesome. Texans just coming together to straight up Texas the whole thing. But that's the reminder for me, is whenever I get frustrated at a situation, I have to remember the dot. The dot is what I understand. Now, if it were my daughter or one of my boys, man, that wouldn't be very comforting in that moment. And there's not a whole lot of comforting from people like getting theological, exegesis of, well, you actually shouldn't be sad. You know why? Because eventually every tear will be, at that point, it's like, I'd just as soon fight you as hug you if you were to say something like that to me, if that had happened to my people. But it's like, at some point you have to have the view of God. And when you're assuming the role of God and saying there could be no net positive to this negative situation, it's like, brother, you're not big enough to sit in that seat. You just don't have, to say you have blinders on would be the understatement of the century.
And we won't get there. You're probably not going to get there at this rate until a year from now, but
we might be might be pipering this, and we might be in 1-1 for the next 8 months.
One of the ways that Paul is going to help us understand the nature of sin in verse 28 is a failure to acknowledge God. And this is one of those moments where God has not gotten any credit for 1,000 summers where nothing like this happened, but he'll get the blame for the summer that it did. And this, according to Paul's theology, reveals the wickedness of man, that you give him no praise and you give him all blame. You fail to acknowledge him, that you've been given 1,000 mercies, both seen and unseen, and you've given no praise to God. So the same thing can happen in a plane crash. Like, nobody at the end of the day gets in bed and just goes, oh my gosh, out of the tens of thousands of planes that have taken off today, they've all landed. God must be good.
Yeah.
One goes down. How can your God be good that a plane? And so this is Paul saying this is the bent of the human heart. It's a failure to acknowledge him. It's a belief in the self. It's a preferring creation to the creator. This is how the wickedness of man has been revealed. This is how the judgment of God, this is why the judgment of God will be revealed, is how chapter 1 is going to continue. Because you never praised God for the thousands of summer afternoons, the thousands of July 4ths that have been frolicking in his creation, enjoying the flavors that he created, letting the sun that he spoke into existence kiss your skin, catching the fish that he spoke into being by the word of his power, and not a mention of praise to him. And now this he's going to get all the blame for. This is Paul talking about the wickedness of the human heart that refuses to acknowledge him and gives themselves over to a depraved mind.
Well, and that's why I literally hope in heaven, I hope there's a lot of things going on in heaven. So, but one of the things, I hope there are amphitheaters, right? So there's the Kyle Thompson amphitheater, and I've got DVR, and I've got all the highlight reels of my life, like the coolest things when no one was around, right? When you hit that trick shot and no one's around and your phone wasn't recording, right? That situation, so you can do all that. But then also all the times where God's like, hey man, so I've told the story before, but it's like, you're mad because you can't find your keys. But if you had found your keys initially and been in the truck, you would have been in that intersection whenever someone blew through the light. So Matt Grassmeyer and I, back in college, we were doing this, character civility community program for these sixth graders, and we're driving back to campus, and I'm very anal about when you're on the front by the light, you're the first car, you got to be paying attention more than anybody, because if you're not paying attention and you don't start driving immediately, 2 or 3 people aren't going to get through the light, and it's your fault because you're a terrible person. And so for whatever reason, I'm distracted, right? I'm at the front of the light, I'm distracted, maybe I'm changing my CD in the CD player. Sorry, we had CDs. I know y'all grew up with cassettes over here. What did y'all have in cars? Did y'all have like
tapes?
Tapes. It was
not
just
any
tapes.
tracks or actual record players.
My parents had both 8-track and record at the house.
Watch out. Okay.
But in the car.
So here we are in the car.
Kenny
I'm probably
Rogers.
changing out the CD to something awesome, right? Probably Amy Grant.
10-disc changer.
Yeah, something like that. So I'm flipping through. And I look up, the light's green. Panic mode, right? I'm the guy in the scenario that everything's falling apart. No one's going to get through this light, but they're too nice to honk at me. And I go to put my foot on the gas, and a truck goes flying through this intersection in Edmond, probably 50, 60 miles an hour. It's definitely speeding. We're talking seconds after the light had turned red. Had I been paying attention, he hits me, right, on the side of the car. And that's probably curtains for me at that point. And so I just hope there's those moments to where God's like, yeah, you were really chastising yourself for being one of those horrible people that won't just go immediately when the light turns green. I made sure you were distracted.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I knew you were going to be done with that CD at that moment, and that you were going to be flipping to another one, and that you weren't going to be able to get it out of the plastic at just the right rate that in order to kind of pop it into the thing and blah, blah, blah. And then here I was taking care of you the entire time. And gosh, we just don't really have that perspective.
Nope.
And another thing that I want to talk about with here, you said, what is apostle? It means sent one, right? I feel like, and again, you guys are, business owners and you have done quite a few different things. I feel like when people hear sent one, they think vocational ministry or mission work, right? So I'm sent. Okay, so I need to move out of my life in whereversville that I live, and I need to go somewhere else. Or, hey, I need to go to Bible school or theology school and get some training, and then I can go into vocational ministry. And so for whatever reason, we think when you say sent one, it means sent away. But it's just like, no. Sent one could be your cubicle farm because you worked at some place where everybody's in their own little cubicle and that's where your team is. It could be doing physical therapy. It could be in sales. It could be in whatever the thing is. It's like your neighborhood that you live in, your HOA, which I don't think anyone actually is allowed to evangelize in an HOA. I think that's in the rules. You're not allowed to do that. But like, that's where you're sent to. But I just feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but like, I feel like when people hear that, they think sent away. It's just like, it's the wrong modality, I think.
Well, and love your neighbor as yourself. But then, in addition to that, it's like we don't look very far to see a mission field around us, right? In our homes, in our relationships, families, kids, spouses, neighbors. But the hard part, I think, on so many Christians is that we the first thing we do is judge whether they deserve it. It's like, hey, I'm sent. But
you're kind of weird.
Yeah,
I don't want to be sent to you.
I had a neighbor at one point where they would pick up dog poop, and I would witness dog poop flying over the fence into my yard, right? Like, and I had a big dog, and they had a small dog, and I know small dog poop, and I'd see it, so I suspected for a while, right? Yeah. And then there was one day I was out in the backyard, and I guess they obviously didn't know I was back there or didn't care, and little toy poodle turds start flying over the fence, and I immediately just kind of write them off. Like, that's all it took. That's all it took for me to feel like you're no longer part of my mission field. Yeah.
Now, imagine if you had known jiu-jitsu or Krav Maga at that point. We're probably having
I was Baptist.
I gouged. Yeah, you couldn't do jiu-jitsu. That's right. Krav, though.
Hey, you know what? I feel like we should set up denominational jiu-jitsu tournaments. So it can be Methodist jitsu, like Assemblies of God jitsu.
Method jitsu.
Right.
Method jitsu.
Church of Christ jitsu. Right. I think we could do all that. We couldn't have any music with that tournament. Right. Something like that. That would be rough.
Could hurt people with the singing.
That's right. It is painful sometimes. Some people are singing to the Lord, and I hope sometimes I wish those are the only people listening would be the Lord, because if I have to listen to it. But no, again, it's the whole sent away thing. Because Browning, I think about this a lot of times, because in those pause you got there that helps carry this forging table up here to the studio, like, you provide a lot of healing and relief for people doing what you do, and you provided healing and relief for me quite a few times with different injuries and bumps and bruises that come from jiu-jitsu or lifting or whatever, just living an active life. In my late 30s, man, I feel like I'm falling apart, and especially at a table like this. But like, you
don't even know yet, bro.
Yeah, it's hard. Everything's painful. But like, that is your mission field, and just by doing a good job and doing a good work, like, you're kind of doing the capital A apostle thing, just by doing the work that you're doing. But at some point, Matt, you've talked about this before. Who has been saved by the, hey, you know what? Something's different about you. I've never heard you cuss. Yeah, I've never heard you listen to any secular music. You don't listen to Slipknot. Yeah, let's try this whole Christian thing out. Like, that's like kind of like church camp language. But like, I'm just wondering from your perspective as well, kind of even just doing what you do for a living.
When we were off air, you were talking about Marty's down in Bartonville, and I just, what a great, just to kind of hear what he's done with his space and the food that he's providing, ice cream, etc. But then providing opportunities for ministry. I mean, that was really, really cool to kind of hear that. I think within my scope as a physical therapist, I know that I'm ministering to people by providing healing physically, but so much of those folks are also hurting mentally. Yeah. And obviously, there's a spiritual aspect to that I can inject in there. So for me, when I see an individual, one of the things that we do with like students, there's like this, I've got like 40 things I've got to evaluate a student on when they come in. But one of them has to do with like cultural diversity and differences and how do they handle different kinds of people. And that's a really, really big one, because I do not get to make a decision on who I could, but I don't get to make a decision on who gets referred to me. They just show up, and I get all people of all walks of life at different variable levels of hurt in those aspects that I mentioned earlier. So I just make it my mission field to, one, create an environment for healing. So I create an environment where they can enjoy being there. So I tell my staff, make it like Cheers. When somebody comes off the elevator, we want to be glad to see them. So I was like, hey, Norm, whatever their name is, like, we want to welcome them in. We want them to be glad to be there. And we want them to know that we're glad to see them. We also want them to be glad to leave too, because we want them to feel better, feel like they got to work out, and then they're heading out. Right. But yeah, when I talk with people, one of my favorite thing to do is evaluations with folks, because I get to dig in and figure out root causes of things. And oftentimes people do not, most injuries, not all of them, but a lot of injuries are just cumulative stress over time. They don't know what they've done. They just know they hurt. And so when I ask them, well, what'd you do? A lot of times they're like, I don't know. I just woke up and I was hurting, and now I've been hurting for 3 months. So I really enjoy just that aspect of it. But in the process of doing that, I get to know these folks.
Yeah.
And I get to know them personally, and different than a doctor that maybe you'll see once every 6 months to a year. I'm seeing these guys once, twice, 3 times a week. And so I'm getting to know them. And so what I just try to make that physical therapy clinic a mission field for me to be able to be someone that's encouraging to them, not only along the way physically, but also emotionally. And then when there's opportunity, and there are a lot of opportunities, injecting some spiritual aspects into that, planting seeds, Christian music on in the background, anything and everything I can do.
Christian metal, or not quite.
Well, I mean, if we're doing like a hit workout with somebody, I might change it up a little bit.
Let's go.
Absolutely.
Little for today, little convictions. But no, you brought up Marty B's. Like, I actually want you to talk a little bit about that, Matt, because I mean, so we talked about this off air, and so we're bringing it back into here. But there are people that they're solid Christians. They're theologically adept. I mean, they pray for and with their families. Like, they're worship with their hands up, falling out in the aisle. People, like, all the signs. All right, they got good fruit coming out of every orifice, but they suck at work. Right, they're a terrible employee, or they're a crappy business owner, or their product or service just isn't really up to snuff, which is an apologetic as well. How you work and the type of employee you are is indicative of kind of what you believe. Because if you crush it everywhere else, but then you're a sluggard at work, like, that's not good either.
Nope.
But we were talking about Marty B's, and you can kind of get into the story of him. But man, you want to talk about apostle? Like, he is a sent one, but he's creating a space for people to be sent to, right? Kind of almost creating that. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, I think it's important to note for people that are listening to this, like, Christianity didn't become the global force it is, from this small group of people in biblical times to 2.38 billion people worldwide through charismatic blue check preachers. It came in the everyday faithfulness of men and women in neighborhoods, workplaces, and places where people gather, whether that be a CrossFit gym or a jiu-jitsu gym, or the gospel is spread through ordinary, mundane, faithful proclamation where God planted us. This is the whole point of the mission of God, that everybody listening to this has been uniquely wired by God. That's Psalm 139, which that wiring actually sent you in a specific direction. There are spreadsheet people and non-spreadsheet people, and that probably came out of the womb that way.
Yeah.
Right? People who are real particular, and people who are a little bit more, right brain, artistic, and your career path is going to more than likely come out of that natural bent, which Psalm 139 says God wove into you, which is going to lay open a specific kind of career for you, which is going to put you in a domain of society. And that domain of society is going to put you in a specific kind of neighborhood, depending on that bent and where you ended up in those domains of society. And all of that, according to David in Psalm 139, is that because God had given good for us to do before a day had yet been lived. So all of that kind of unique wiring was put in place so that we could push back darkness and establish light. And not everybody's kind of a charismatic extrovert. That doesn't matter. You've been uniquely wired. And then Acts 17, Paul's going to argue you've been uniquely placed, that the times and boundaries of our habitation have been set by God. For what reason? So that men might seek him and find him, though he is no far from any of us. So how do I know he's not far from your neighbor? Because you're there.
Yeah.
How do I know that God might be really into saving your coworker? Well, because he put you there. Why did I believe that some of the guys that I trained jiu-jitsu with were going to become Christians? Because that's the gym I joined, and I'm coming to that gym with the light of the gospel. I'm there to learn jiu-jitsu, and I'm there to pray for people, to be a Christian while I'm there, and to share the good news of the gospel where I have opportunity. And that's going to be true for all of us. Then you throw in the unique gifting that Paul writes about in Corinthians, the spiritual gifts. Now, everybody listening to this, whether they're a trash guy or a lawyer or in the C-suite of a Fortune 500 company, has been uniquely wired, uniquely placed, and uniquely gifted for such a moment as this in history. And so Marty's been a longtime member of our church, Marty Bryan, and he built a wildly successful restaurant, concert venue space out in Bartonville, between Flower Mound and Argyle. And he just leverages that whole thing for the kingdom of God. Once a month, he has a church's worship team come out and do a night of worship, does a men's Bible study, does a women's Bible study, draws hundreds of people, both churched and unchurched. And then every June, he just got so frustrated with Pride Month that he went the opposite way with it, where June at Marty's is like faith and freedom and family, and they just celebrate family. So he shows kids movies out in the concert venue. If you got kids with you, there are discounts, and he just prioritizes what God prioritizes: faith and family, and this idea of the nuclear family unit as the Bible understands it. And so this is Marty pushing back darkness and establishing light, not by preaching per se. I've never heard him get up on stage and preach, but he is a brilliant businessman. He is just an exceptional, he kind of found the magic line between quality and cost and hospitality, and everything he opens, everything he touches turns to gold. But the underlying purpose of all of that for Marty is the kingdom of God. And you just watch him live his life, and it's just so evident that he understands that he's been uniquely wired by God. He's not called to vocational ministry. It's not where his gifts lie. Now, could his gifts be used for really good things inside the wall? Absolutely, They could. He would probably be miserable. Like, he needs to be out there shaking hands, starting businesses, starting restaurants, being the face of those restaurants, making people feel welcome, experience true hospitality, and feast. I think Ecclesiastes says like 12 times, good food, good wine with good friends is a holy thing. And he's creating those kind of spaces. We are a better area because Marty B's faithfulness to live into what God had for him and not be in vocational ministry than had he gone to vocational ministry. That's me guessing, but.
Well, and I mean, when I talk to people that are like, because if someone has like an adult experience with the Lord, right? So maybe they didn't go to church, or they were kind of church, they kind of understood the language of church, and then they become a convert as an adult. Some people think like, oh, everything needs to change. Like you talk about the story, like you started wearing corny Christian t-shirts when you became a Christian, and you're burning all your secular CDs or 8-tracks, and then you're like kind of going back and you're like, okay, I need to like figure out like what I need to do. And you just try to go way overboard, and you're like, no, I need to quit my job working at this law firm because, I got to give my life to the Lord. It's like, no, you missed some steps in there, and it is about placement, right? Yeah. And we're all placed in an area. And again, you're on varying locations on the spear, right? Because the spear, you can say that's the church or whatever, there are people that are on the tip of the spear, right? So pastors, if they're doing it right, are on the tip of the spear. I've talked about before, like the show and the darkness that, I expose myself to so I can help you push back against that darkness when you recognize it. You're kind of at the tip of the spear. But the thing is when you do something like the forging table, when you do something like my Dominion program where I'm like coaching guys and all that, I'm kind of bringing y'all up to the tip of the spear a little bit, and you're getting a little bit of a hint as to kind of what that looks like on a macro scale. The same thing happens in ministry. You and I have talked about it with Joby, talked about it with some other pastors, to where it's just like it can be really, really rough. But that's what you were called to do. Like, I love when Joby said he decided to go into vocational ministry, that he prayed to God, don't lighten my load, broaden my shoulders.
Yeah.
Well, you were built from the beginning to have broad enough shoulders to do what the Lord needs you to do.
Yeah.
Now, you can walk in unrepentant sin and kind of destroy your own calling in a lot of different ways. You could lose your calling and be called to something else because you didn't do your part of it. But it's that old adage of God can move mountains, but he needs you to bring a shovel kind of a thing. So it's like, yeah, could God snap his fingers? He wouldn't even need to snap his fingers. It would just be whatever he would want it to be. But that's just, I think it's a mindset shift that a lot of guys need to get into.
And a lot of, like, you don't want someone else's calling. You want yours.
You want your race.
You would be a cheap version of whoever that is you're looking at and going, ooh, I want to do that. But you would just be a cheap version of that. And you need to be fully you and who God made you and own that. And maybe you're not ever going to be tip of the spear. It's
Fine.
okay. You're part of the spear.
That's right.
Well, and some people they break out physically, like to think about getting up on stage and talking.
Yeah.
Like they have physical signs of how terrifying that is to them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what a blessing that is to that person, that they understand that, like, they're not wired that way.
Yeah.
And where you are, like, I imagine like this, God put you where you are. If you became a Christian later in life, you've established roots. Well, if you sever the plant from the roots, you don't know if that, like, how well that plant will survive.
Yeah.
Your roots are your testimony.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm telling you about where I've been and all of that, and how much more impactful is that if it's in the area where you are. It's like these people in Paul, and you talk about Paul and at the stoning of Stephen, and then showing up at the church of Antioch, going from Saul to Paul. And I'm sure a lot of the people were like, they're scooting down the aisle, being like, bro, I know that guy. You know what I mean? But that much more powerful, the power of Jesus Christ in your life, where, hey, I know the roots that dude's got. And to see the fruit that his life is now producing, Jesus is the only reason that's possible.
Well, and Dagan, so I love the way you describe that with roots, because in my Dominion program, I have 6 pillars of a Dominion man. One of them is direction over vision. Vision's good. Direction is just better. Because you have these people that, maybe they'll read the latest self-help book, or maybe they'll go to a conference, or maybe they'll listen to a sermon, and then they're like, oh, I've received a vision from the Lord, and it's to do the exact opposite of everything that I'm doing right now, and to just completely uproot my entire life and family. But the thing is when you have been given the blessing of deep roots in an area or a business or a whatever thing, and then you get a vision because you watched a YouTube video, and then you yank up the plant with the roots, and then you try to replant it somewhere else. Well, the root system has to kind of start all over again. Yeah. And it's like, again, I'm okay with vision. But with a lot of people, it's like we need to soberly evaluate whether or not God is changing your direction, right? Because I use the example, like if a helicopter were to pick us up today and try to fly us to Busch Stadium in St. Louis, there's a heading you could be on where you could get a little bit left, a little bit right, but eventually you're going to see the arch, and then you're going to find the stadium, and boom, you're going to be able to land there, right? But if you just kind of go and you're like, I'm just going to start flying that direction and we're going to end up at Busch Stadium, it's like, no, like you have to have a direction that you're heading, and who is going to establish your steps? Is it going to be you every time? Or are you just going to go and say, God bless all of my decisions because I got this? It's like, man, that's kind of a dangerous place to be.
Well, and it's so much more natural. We know when people are being authentic. Yeah. Right? And there's an attractiveness to that. I know when I get up or when I hear someone speak or when I hear someone worship or lead worship, like there's some people that come to mind. Brad Kilman is a guy I went to college with. When Brad Kilman leads worship, man, the Holy Spirit is leading Brad Kilman through worship. And then I've got other people who have thought they probably participated in worship, got a guitar at a pawn shop, learned how to play the guitar, and imagined themselves in the position of worship leader. And it is just not working.
Not the same.
You know what I mean? It's like that was... Oh yeah, we did verse, chorus, bridge, chorus 4 times, and now we're gonna but I didn't feel a stirring in my heart. Like when we all operate as parts of the body, hands and arms and legs and feet, like that is beautiful. It's not as there are some things that look more attractive that we would love to be able to say, well, I could get up and speak and lead and say some great things and make people laugh, or I could play guitar and make people just feel like, flood them with emotion of the Holy Spirit and prepare them to hear the word of God spoken. But that may not be your role.
Yeah.
When it may not be your role, and you mentioned like the blue check mark preachers or whatever, you know what some guys are called to do? Lead a congregation in a small town of 30 people and love those people and be there when babies are born and bury the people whenever they pass and all that. And they're not meant to write books, and they're not meant to speak at conferences, and maybe they don't even have a desire for that.
That's 90% of pastors.
Let's go. Yeah. And just think about the flock. And again, there's a lot of great churches within 829, and then of course we got a great relationship with Church 1122 and Joby and what they're doing, but everyone's called to what they're called to.
That's right.
And you brought up earlier, so you train at Double Five with Rafael Formiga down there in Dallas, just a tremendous gym. But there's a couple of guys you train with, so Isaac Tuaefa and Ryan Kramer. So they're the guys that help run Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu, and they're very subtle in their marketing. So their rash guards say real big, Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu on the front, so there's no confusion. Real clever. But those are guys that are, Ryan's a black belt and Isaac is a brown belt. They both take training seriously. They have athletic backgrounds that they've continued as they're aging. They're good family men.
Yep.
But there's no confusion as to why those men train and comport themselves in the way that they do. Because you could be wearing the Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu rash guard, and then you get tapped by a lower belt, and you go storming off the mat, throwing your stuff and cussing the gym, and I'm never going to effing do this again. And what that type of thing, it's like, it's a bit problematic. But the way these guys carry themselves, the way they teach others, the way they help people, and I mean, Formiga himself, being able to have guys like that there and to not feel like an infiltration, but like it's a welcome addition to what you're doing there. And you were just mentioning last night when we were hanging out on the porch, like how many guys from Double Five have been baptized since you started training there, and since those guys?
We've got to be getting close to, I'm hoping double digits here soon. I mean, I know we just did 3 2 weeks ago, and like this morning after the morning roll, there's 20 something guys that just went over to this guy named Johnny Walker's place, and they're just sharing their testimony and reading the Bible. And so there's been this like mini revival breaking out at Double Five that's been so fun. Like a guy named Will Tate, who I'm not sure you've met yet, but he was there that Saturday night
at your house. Yeah,
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
But Big Isaac, Kramer, but even guys like JP Dental, there's a guy named Stephen Little, like these guys are just they had a profound encounter with Jesus like 3 or 4 years ago, just all came back completely different men, and they've been on it, man. And so the number of guys right now that are coming back to church or coming to Christ or just moving towards other men for vulnerable, honest relationship, moving towards Jesus. It's been a long time since I've been caught up in something quite like that.
And man, you can just feel it when you go into certain places, and you can just see something like that happen. And you talk about your King's Table all the time. I use the term foxhole. Joby talks about mat carriers, mat toters. So everyone's kind of got that guy, maybe in high school or college, or maybe even at your workplace, that if y'all need something fun to do, a fun activity, this person knows the funny movie, they know the funny board game, they know the thing, they're kind of that person, they're a goofball, they're tons of fun. Your life's falling apart at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not calling Goofy Pants. You're not calling that dude, right? And so same thing at a jiu-jitsu gym. You have everything from, the trash guy to the surgeon, right, that are there. And then different guys, so it's like, my FFL, that every time I transfer a firearm, like I train with him. There are guys that are physical therapists, there are guys that are in sales, there are guys that are doing taxes, there are dentists, there are all kinds of things at our gym. And so, my tooth's kind of hurting, I know who I can go and chat and talk with, right? But when your life is falling apart, again, the scenario that I usually open all my talks with, I know it's kind of cheating, but I have everyone close their eyes because I want them to feel what I'm describing. I'm like, guys, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and your life is completely falling apart. Maybe it's because, one of your kids went prodigal. Maybe it's because you lost your job and your nest egg and you're thinking bankruptcy's next. Maybe you found some text messages with your wife and another guy and you're like, oh no, what's happening? Like whatever your scenario is, create your scenario. And your life's falling apart. Who are you calling? And the thing for most men is the answer is no one. Because they have no one. Because they bought into this American machismo lie that the lone wolf survives. Well, watch Nat Geo, dudes. You know what happens to lone wolves? They die, right? Even the alphas, when they age out of the pack, they die alone. They either freeze to death, starve to death, or they're killed by another animal. Sometimes some of the wolves that got them out of the pack to begin with, right? But we buy into this idea that we can do it, that we are enough, that if we just say these affirmations in the mirror, that we can do this on our own. It's just not true. And so when you have a Isaac or a Ryan or a Matt or a somebody at your gym and your life's falling apart, guess what? You just give them a call.
Yep.
JP Donnell, like you heard him maybe share his testimony and you see what Jesus has done in his life. Your life's falling apart. You're not calling the goofball. You're not calling the guy that's really good at making money. You're not calling the restaurateur who only is known by how good of sandwiches that he makes. You're calling the dudes that are going to war, and sometimes they go to war by going to their knees and praying to God. It's just it's a different setup.
Well, and God knows, right? He loves us, and out of his love for us, he puts guardrails in place because he knows this world is jacked up, and he knows that I need to go, if I am faithful and go to church on Sunday and I sit through powerful worship, I hear his word preached in a community of believers, that's not it for my week. I need to show up at my PT on Monday and have someone love me to continue like that feeling and that and to live in that environment. And he loves me enough to provide people with all the different skill sets and all of the different places that I go to reinforce his message that he loves me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And thank God that he does that.
Amen.
Well, Browning, in between these last two recordings, you said that your prediction is that in our 4 hours together, we would be getting through Romans 1:4. I was like, Browning's dumb. Like, we're obviously going to clear through that. Guys, we are technically on part 2. He's counting up the words here. In 2 hours, we've got through how many words?
11 words.
11 words in 2 hours.
Chipping away.
Here I was making fun of John Piper's Asperger's, and here we are. We're on pace to finish Romans by 2087. And so
our reason for going slow is a little bit slower, a little different than John's, but it's fine.
But we're basically the same thing.
Basically.
We're not David, but we are Piper, right? So, right?
There it is.
It's got to come back.
I was waiting.
Every time.
I can't believe.
I just got to sneak it in.
I can't believe it didn't happen in episode 1. I would have lost a bet.
It may happen. The last 2. Did you bet on it? Like how often I would bring up? Well, we're going to unhitch and we're going to become David by the end of this whole thing. But guys, we're going to have to leave our discussion of part 2 of Romans 1:1, and we'll come back next week for part 3 of Romans 1:1. So make sure you guys are read up through that point. Make sure that you
don't fall behind.
Yeah, don't fall behind in the reading because you'll never catch up. Because by next week we will maybe get to 13 or 14 words. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Crossway starter set. That's in the show notes. It's 5 fantastic books, and you can get them all at a discount. Go to the show notes and check that out. Logos Bible Software, best Bible software on the planet Earth. Go there and you can get it at a discount. The discount is here in the link in the show notes, and also we are a donation-based ministry. So if you want to see us to be able to continue to equip men around the globe to push back darkness, hop on board and be a donor. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.